I can really recommend being a foster carer for Notts County Council. There's always someone walking the journey alongside you, whether that's other foster carers or social workers. It really helps to provide stability and consistency for children who really need it, and that's really rewarding as a foster carer.
Roger and I have been fostering for 35 years. We do deal with challenges, but to say we've been doing it for 35 years to me proves that it's not impossible. We learn an awful lot from these young people, and even now we're still learning.
As a foster family, we care, we want to make a difference, and we get so much fulfilment from fostering. The satisfaction of making a difference is something that money can't buy. Just seeing the smiles on the children's faces and helping them reach their potential is wonderful.
We work as family workers within the fostering service for Nottinghamshire County Council.
I really enjoy my work. I really enjoy meeting lots of different foster carers.
You know, we get to know the families, we get to know the kids, and we care, basically. It's important as it is to them that the kids are getting the support that they need.
A lot of people said to me they would like to be a foster carer, but there's something stopping them. I had that as well. And we decided just to jump in and do it and see what happened. And for us, it's been the best decision we've ever made.
It's been a fantastic decision, it really has, yes.
Once people start to become a foster carer and take that leap to do it, they'll understand how much it gives back, not just to the child, but how much it empowers you as well.
I'm Leon, I'm a care leaver, and I've been in care since I was 8. I've been with the same parents since, and they're amazing. They are my foster parents, but I do class them as my parents, my mum and dad. All a child wants really from a family is to be supported, loved and cared for, and know they're there because they're wanted. From personal experience, I know the difference it's made for my life.
We always say that we foster as a whole family. It's not just us who are the carers, our children are involved in that. And even now, people express concern about the effect on our birth children of foster caring. I think we need to kind of get past that and dispel that myth, because actually the overall effect on our children, I think, is positive. They're learning new skills, they're gaining empathy, they're interacting with children from different backgrounds. For a long time we didn't make use of support care, and we wanted our child to settle into our placement and not feel pushed out, but it's actually been really helpful for us to start to have support care.
We've known Zoe for a number of years, and it's meant that we got to know her foster child. So for her it's been like coming for a sleepover rather than a feeling she's coming to another family. I got into fostering for Notts County Council, and it was something that I've always wanted to do, but working full time and my husband also working full time, we thought it's not really going to be something we can do now. But after looking at the website, we realised there was this wonderful thing called support care that we were able to offer. It might surprise you, but actually I'm under 30, I don't have any children of my own, and that doesn't stop you from being a foster carer.
I think some people don't go into foster care because they think it's going to be really costly to have another child living in their house, but actually the fostering allowance is generous enough to cover all the costs of having a child living with you.
We have a lot of fun on the weekends when we have foster children in. We get to go to parks, ice skating, children's events, trampolining parks like I Jump.
We get access to the Max card, which is a discount card for foster carers and their children to access different local amenities. Also recently we went on holiday and we were able to use the Max card to get free access to some castles and historical places because it's a national initiative.
We chose to go with Notts County Council because of the support care that was offered and the training. And it's always local to Nottinghamshire. My parents are foster carers for an agency and they found it really difficult to get support care for their child.
My name's Lynn. I am now a support foster carer. We were mainstream carers, but given our ages, we felt that we couldn't commit to children for long term anymore. We just find it really rewarding, the relationships we build up with these young people, and we feel we're perhaps a bit like grandparents to them. With the children coming here for weekends, this enables their mainstream carers to have a break, and this makes things more secure perhaps for the children to continue there. I work with my supervising social worker to sort out the dates. She comes out to see us every month, and it's all very relaxed. I find Robin really easy to speak to. She listens to my concerns, and I value what she is saying to me in return.
The benefits of a supervising social worker are always having someone to contact. There is also emergency duty team that they can contact on a weekend and out of hours. I think the times that it gets difficult is when, you know, she's supported a child for a long time and then they're either moving on out of area or they're moving on because they've reached the age of 18, you know, and she has to say goodbye to that child, so that can be always emotionally draining. Generally, it's staying in touch so they know that you do care about them and you are concerned, you know, that the impact that something like that has had on them.
You do feel fully supported. It's like working in a team. We still even now go on training sessions. I almost look forward to those sessions because you meet other foster carers there and it's very interesting. I've always fostered with my husband, who's brilliant, and I feel personally I couldn't do it without him. He's super with the kids, and it's just something we continue to enjoy doing. A lot of our friends feel at the ages we are, we shouldn't be doing it, but it's a way of life for us now.
I'm Mark. I'm a foster carer dad in the family. I'm the fun dad, if you like. I've tried to be anyway, try to be.
And I'm Amy, a foster carer. So we have 4 children of our own.
Are we all ready? Has the live stream been set up? Has it started?
We're live, Chair, yes.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Children and Young People's Committee, which again is being held remotely with the majority, if not all, of the 11 members joining the meeting from their own homes. So we will introduce ourselves. I'm Councillor Philip Owen, the chairman of the Children and Young People's Services Committee, and we have in attendance Councillor Sue Saddington and Councillor Tracy Taylor, who are the 2 vice chairmen of the committee. We have Councillor Samantha Deakin, Councillor Boyd Elliott, Councillor John Handley, Councillor Errol Henry, Councillor Paul Henshaw, Councillor Roger Jackson, Councillor John Peck, and Councillor Liz Plant. And I think we also have in the audience Councillor Sybil Fielding, who, of course, has an interest in item number 7 on the agenda. We have officers present. We have Colin Pettigrew, who is the Corporate Director for Children and Young People's Services and Schools. Marion Clay, who is the Service Director for Education, Learning and Skills, is on annual leave this week, I believe, and so Karen Human, who is the Group Manager for Education, Access and Partnership, is standing in for her. We have the Service Director for Youth, Families and Social Work, Steve Edwards, and we have the Service Director Commissioning and Resources, Lawrence Jones, as well as other officers to support as necessary. This is the 7th, apparently the 7th virtual meeting of the Children and Young People's Committee, to be held in line with the new requirements. They don't seem very new now. They seem to have been going on for an age, of the Coronavirus Act 2020. And I always make a plea at this point to bear with us if we experience any technical issues, which we do from time to time. If we do lose members, any members from the call temporarily, then they will be assisted in getting them in being reconnected as soon as possible, hopefully without the need to halt proceedings. But I'm more than happy to halt for 5 minutes or so if there are particular difficulties. Officers will inform the meeting if they are unable to rectify the problem and if we need the meeting to be paused or adjourned temporarily, but we keep our fingers crossed that we don't. So if, without further ado, can I move on to the item number 1 on the agenda, which are the minutes of the last meeting. And so can I ask that we agree those minutes unless anyone has any objections? If you could indicate now if you have an objection. We don't apparently need to take a vote on this. So I can see nobody arguing that the minutes are an accurate record, so we'll accept those. Item number 2, apologies for absence. Looking around, I don't think we've got any apologies, or we won't have any apologies, or any substitutes. I can't see any.
That's correct, Chair. We have a full house today of the committee members.
The next item, declarations of interest by members and officers, disclosable pecuniary and private interests. Are there any interests to declare? Can't see anybody. Nope. So if we can move then to the first substantive item on the agenda, which is school holiday term dates for local authority maintained schools. And you can see the report set out in front of you. And we have 3 recommendations on page 9 and 10 of the agenda booklet, and I will move those recommendations.
I will second them, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from members? No, in which case, can we move to the vote? Can I have a show of hands, please? All in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. If we can then move to item number 5, which is admissions applications in the normal admissions round to Nottinghamshire Schools and Academies 2020-21 academic year. Again, you have got the report in front of you, and there is a recommendation on page 24, which I move.
I will second, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on that particular report? Can't see anybody indicating, so can we have a show of hands, please? All those in favour? That looks to be unanimous again. Thank you very much. If we can move to item number 6, which is the Nottinghamshire School Admission Arrangements 2022-23. Again, you have the report set out in front of you, and there is an appendix on the yellow pages. There is one recommendation with 4 bullet points, which I move on page 29.
I will second those, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? No, in that case, can we have a show of hands, all those in favour? Thank you very much. I assume, Councillor Saddington, you're in favour, but you've turned your camera off, so I can't see you. What are you doing that you shouldn't be whilst there's a meeting going on, I ask myself. And now you've muted so you can't tell us what you're doing.
I'll tell you, I was just accepting a cup of coffee.
Yes, we'll believe you. Okay.
Here it is, just here.
Okay. Item number 7, proposed changes to North Worksop Children's Centre Rhodesia site. Again, you have the report set out in front of you, and there is one recommendation at the bottom of page 81, which I move.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, as I said, we have Councillor Fielding present with us. Councillor Fielding has indicated that she would like to speak, and I'm exercising my discretion as chairman of the committee to allow her to do so. So, Councillor Fielding, over to you.
Chair, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak at committee today. I appreciate that I'm not a member of this committee. However, I implore all members who are able to vote to listen carefully to what I, as the long-standing member for this division, have to say on the matter. You might recall that at full council in December, I used my constituency speech to highlight my disappointment about the issue of this children's centre being hived off to the local school and therefore no longer available to the young families in my division. During this speech, I highlighted that Rhodesia is the third most deprived centile in the country and borders the most deprived centile according to the Index of Multiple Deprivation. I also emphasised the necessity for early intervention services in giving children and young people in Rhodesia a fighting chance, and pointed out, despite the fact there is another centre in Worksop, many families do not have their own transport, so these services have to be within walking distance. I made a very simple request, and that was that this consultation specifically address the actual needs of the children, young people and their families in Rhodesia, rather than simply hiving off the centre to the school to save money. So you'll fully understand my utter disbelief at the report before us today and wonder whether any of what I said at full council in December was even heard. Because this report makes no attempt to identify the needs of the families and young people in Rhodesia, there's not a single reference to them. There is a deliberate attempt to portray a lack of interest in the centre and a table which shows monthly footfall in 2017 and 18, hardly surprising that numbers might be considered low, given that this report highlights these services had already begun to be stripped back one by one in an effort to save money, badged up as more targeted services. The fact is, even with these so-called low footfall, on a monthly basis, these figures demonstrate that 44 families and 50 children were reached and helped in an average month. Over the year, that equates to 600 children interacting with over 200 professionals. So I now know there will be 600 children and families in Rhodesia whose lives will be worse off for not having this opportunity. Where have you addressed these children and families in this report? The deprivation and the inequality and the hardship was all in existence before COVID took hold of our communities. And you'll no doubt be aware there are huge concerns around the mental health of our children and families, many who will have been out of school, living in food insecure homes with parents who are struggling to make ends meet. This centre could be a lifeline of support to these children and families, but you want to hand over the keys, turn your back and walk away, even when the Children Commissioner is publicly coming out and stating that our children need to be put at the centre of our recovery from COVID. It is a shameful decision and one being taken at the worst possible time, but it clearly highlights where this administration priorities lie for the future of our county. No aspiration to improve our most needy areas, no ambition for our children and young people, and no desire to protect those most vulnerable in the county. Shameful. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak at the committee, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. Are there any other members that wish to comment before I ask for an officer response? And then Councillor Plant.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And I fully support all the comments that have obviously been made by Councillor Fielding. I was particularly despondent when I read this report, although not surprised. I mean, just a bit of a blast from the past for myself, really. Nearly 20 years ago, I had the pleasure of working at County Hall as the Sure Start Development Officer. It was in the very early days, obviously, of the Blair government, and they were establishing a network of children's centres in disadvantaged areas throughout the country. It was part of my role to work with primary head teachers in terms of getting their, well, obviously explaining to them the purpose of children's centres and where they could become involved and get the children and the families within the school involved in these centres. I have to say that the drive and the enthusiasm and the resources that were available then, it was something I'd never met, and I've never met since in education or in obviously local government. The children's centres that were established, there was obviously very few at that time. It was the first wave, I think. But there were certainly one in the Mansfield area where what was on offer, I mean, just to visit them, they were really exciting, vibrant places to visit. They were open in the day, they were open in the evenings, they were open at weekends, and they made a real difference, not just to the families and the children that attended, but to the community in which they were situated. So that sort of explains a little bit as to why I was so despondent reading this report. I mean, the report, it reads as a fait accompli. The decision has been made. If a building is only open for 2 hours a week, I really don't see how it can possibly have a high footfall. But as Councillor Fielding has said, that parents who have been using this building, and our concern is what is happening to in terms of the support that they need. Yes, the focus now is very much on outreach and in people's homes, but without a doubt, that is not what the purpose of a children's centre is. The building is still needed there. I think it would have been helpful if we'd got some information on exactly how many home visits were being made, what outreach was also being offered in this area instead of at the building, so we could actually see that this was what was going on. My other concern is that the report it also mentions that there was I can't actually get from the report whether the children's centre is within the site of the primary school or very close to. And it concerns me that if it's that close, that relationships couldn't have been built up with that school, where they were actually really encouraging their families and children to actually use the centre. It says there was a private nursery at one time in the building, and that obviously, it didn't succeed. But then again, there's a nursery within the school. So I can't understand how that works at all, because obviously parents given the choice would choose to send their 3 and 4 year olds to the school nursery because they'll be going on into that school. I do wonder in terms of what the usage the school is going to make of it going forward. Are they going to actually consider taking in the 2 year olds? Where are the 2 year olds going for their provision in this area? So that's certainly an issue. I found the yellow pages, what was it called? Community consultation feedback newsletter was extremely worrying. Under why, it says the Children's Centre service has changed, with most of the service now delivered in a family's home or online. This means some of our buildings are rarely used. Well, I mean, that is a real worrying statement going forward. If that is now the overriding principle for our children's centres, all services to be delivered at home or online, we can just see where this is going for all the other our children's centre buildings that we have in Nottinghamshire. The other statement, and the thing that concerns me most, is that it is saying very much that many services are actually being delivered within the homes. Now, that obviously hasn't been happening for the past year. It can't have been, because we've had the COVID pandemic. So presumably services have gone online. There are huge numbers of disadvantaged families who haven't got the IT equipment to actually receive all of this. So I don't know, what in terms of how they have been supportive. And it really concerns me that in terms of COVID, these families have had very little support from the services that they need. They've had very little support from friends and family within the community. We've had new mums with babies who've had little contact with other mums and their babies. We've got stressed families who've been at home trying to home educate their children if they haven't got a place in school. They've got lack of space, they're worrying about their jobs, they're worrying about their bills, they're worrying about, some of them could be in abusive relationships. And my point of that is that when it is safe to do so, these parents do not need services within their own home. They need to leave those homes and to come into a centre where they can actually receive services together and actually learn from one another and because for their own mental health and well-being, they need to leave their homes and come into a centre where they can actually meet with other children and families. And really, it is totally the wrong time to be looking at making this decision, because the need is going to be greater than ever for a children's centre building and for services to be delivered from that building. And for that reason, the Labour Group will not be supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Plant. Councillor Peck, you are indicating that you'd like to comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I fully endorse the comments of Councillor Plant just now, and in particular those of Councillor Fielding. As the local member, I defer to her knowledge of the area. It's not an area I know terribly well, even though it's only a few miles from where I live, but I do know that it's parts of it are a particularly deprived community, as Councillor Fielding has indicated. I agree with Councillor Plant that I think this is the wrong time to be doing this. It's just sending the wrong message. I think as part of the county's post-COVID recovery plan, I think children's centres are going to play an increasingly important role in that, or should be placing an important role in that. There are families that have suffered greatly during this period and will be doing for some time to come. And I think they're going to need all the support that they can possibly get, particularly in areas such as Rhodesia. I don't get the sense from the report that there's been a huge amount of effort put in to making this building more viable than the report claims it has been. And I think that the effort should be coming at it from a different angle entirely, rather than just closing it, handing it over to the school and saying goodbye and saving a few £1,000. I think that a considerable effort should be put into making this a viable annex to the Gateford Park Children's Centre, and putting in all the services that I think many of the families in areas like Rhodesia are going to increasingly need over the coming period. I'm certainly, like Councillor Plant, I'm not satisfied that just offering services in person in the home, when that's allowed, or through Zoom or some sort of online mechanism is adequate at all. So certainly I should be opposing the proposal. I don't think that the consultation appears to have been anything like what it could have been. So I will certainly be voting against this.
Thank you, Councillor Peck. Any other member? Councillor Henshaw, thank you.
Thanks for bringing me in, Chair. I'm sorry if you heard my phone go off then. I tried to mute it quickly. But anyway, all our other colleagues are mindful and really think we ought to listen to the local member who knows the area very, very well and, has represented it for a long time. I mean, some of the points that she raised are very valid. I mean, I would also urge that possibly we could consider doing a more full exercise in consultation in the area. We could even reinstate the footfall exercise that was abandoned due to the COVID pandemic, which which would be a step in the right direction to gain information. I think, however limited this centre provides an opportunity for families and children to socially interact, and especially coming out of the COVID pandemic, there has been a lot of store given to the effects on the mental health of families and children due to the social isolation of them. And I think what we're doing, we're building up a big problem for the future if we don't address that problem. Social interactions are vital, even if they're in a limited situation. So I really strongly feel that it's the wrong time to reduce any opportunities for families and children to socially interact. And I know, looking at the report, we're going to possibly be saving 14k. But the effects of reducing social interactions and families and children being able to mix and interact, if we don't address that problem, that £14,000 saving is going to be minimal, and all we're going to be doing is building up problems for the future, which in the long term are going to increase the amount of money we spend. So really, we're not going to be saving anything. So I, with my colleagues, will be voting against this, and I would respectfully ask that the chair lets us have a recorded vote on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Whenever any issue is going to be contested, as you know from past experience, I've always asked for it to be not an official recorded vote, unless that is what you are wanting, which I'm more than happy to do. But I get the Democratic Services Officer to read out the names, which would be my intention anyway.
Sorry, Chair, I would ask for a formal recorded vote if that's possible, please.
That's perfectly possible.
Thank you.
That's
Chair.
not a problem.
Sorry, Chair, we just need that to be seconded by someone else.
Yes. I can see hands going up, so that is seconded by
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Democratic Services.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I've obviously listened to all of the speakers so far. I think it's thrown out probably more questions for me than answers. And it may well be that officers are already prepared to address some of the questions that it's raised in my mind even. I'd be interested to hear some kind of clarity on the numbers, particularly over footfall, because Councillor Fielding made various calculations in her speech that suggested there were absolute numbers of children who had been attending this centre and therefore would no longer have access to services, whereas my reading of the report suggests that the figures are footfall and involve a number of double counting. So perhaps officers would address that notion of numbers, because I think that they've maybe been magnified in Councillor Fielding's speech. I'd also like to understand, if officers are able to answer this today, the idea that Councillor Henshaw's raised about whether families have been accessing the building for some of those kind of socialisation and nurture reasons that he suggests are valuable. I agree that they're valuable. I don't believe that they've been taking place at this facility, and I don't just mean through the last 12 months. I believe that the provision at this facility was not of that nature, so maybe our officers could address that. And again, taking that theme into the future, and reading some of the aspirations that the school has for the building, if they can actually operate it, which refers to reconfiguring provision and having foundation stage and nurture group activities. As I read that, I believe that the opportunities for families in this area will be better served by the school having and operating the building. So I'd kind of like to just explore with officers what sort of provision Councillor Henshaw thinks may have been provided and whether that was the case, and how we, through our children's centre services, would actually ensure that we've got some of that access to families in meeting needs going forward, whether from this building or whether through the sort of in-home and outreach services that we do through the mainstream of our children's centre service provision now, here and elsewhere. So that's kind of my thinking, Chair, because I genuinely do think that this is the best thing to do. The school clearly has a plan and a use and a dynamic use for this site within this community. And I think we should give the families and children the best opportunities in this community. I believe this paper offers that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I can see no other member indicating to speak, so I'm going to ask Irene Kakulkis, who is the lead officer responsible in this area, if she would like to address some of the questions that have been raised before I sum up. Irene, if you would like to
thanks, Chair. I think Lawrence Jones wanted to say something first, and then I'll...
Okay, fine. Lawrence, if you'd like to say something.
Thank you. I guess I'd just like to start with a reminder that our children's centre services are no longer universal services, have not been for a number of years after this committee voted for them to be a targeted service for vulnerable children. So these are not open access services for all members of the community with young children. They are targeted at vulnerable people in those communities, and that's the basis of our children's centre services. We constantly work with families in local areas in terms of how we want them to deliver those services. That can be a mixture of dedicated children's centre buildings, in some places use of other community facilities, and delivered in the homes. With many of our families nowadays, in terms of the access to children's centre services, they are the most difficult to reach. They are those that don't want to voluntarily engage, with them being the most vulnerable, and therefore outreach is probably one of the best ways that we can to reach those families. In terms of the types of facilities, because of the nature of the work with those families, they tend not to be around activities of socialisation, although there are some where we do small group work in order to take forward certain evidence-based strategies. And what we do here through Children's Centre Services is we used evidence-based strategies to address those vulnerabilities in those families. So that's very much at the heart of what we're doing. In terms of the issue around footfall, I believe, and Irene can give more details, that it amounts to about 6 or 7 families per month who were using the centre pre-COVID. So before the pandemic, it was about 6 or 7 families per month who were actually accessing the centre. But I will ask Irene to give slightly more detail on that and the provision that's envisaged from the school itself. Just in terms of the consultation, we are very clear that it met all of the legal requirements for a consultation. Because of the issues with COVID, it was significantly extended in terms of the period that we would normally do for such a consultation. And we work very closely with both the school, local health provision, users of the centre existing, and through social media in the local community, as well as contact with local politicians to gather the responses. So that just gives, I suppose, a brief overview. I'll ask Irene if she can provide a little more detail as well.
Thank you, Lawrence, for that. Irene, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify a few points, the footfall information in the report definitely is double counting, and it is about 6 or 7 families. We can certainly check, but it's useful to see the dates associated with the footfall. So the last 2 exercises we did were 2017 and 2018. During those years, we had a private nursery in the building. So the majority of those families were actually accessing for the nursery. What happened with the nursery? The school decided to set up early years provision, and we're focusing on 3 and 4-year-olds. So the nursery on site was only providing childcare for 2-year-olds. It is not sustainable, especially in an area of great deprivation. We know we struggle to get those 2-year-olds into the childcare provision. The school are going to move into the building to use it for their own early years provision, which is the 3 and 4-year-olds we already have, and within phase 2, they're going to be exploring taking funded 2-year-olds as well. And that's certainly something we want them to do, and they're keen, but at the moment they want to get in the building first and get set up. So there is, you know, it does link to the nursery provision. The nursery did close in 2019, and a footfall exercise was due to be carried out and wasn't, which is a shame. And obviously we were going to do it again this year, and then we couldn't because of COVID. If we were to do another footfall exercise, we would have to do it post-lockdown. Because it's a satellite site, it's not one that is open every day. We have 18 centres that are open every day and have been throughout every single lockdown. But again, it's going back to Lawrence's point, we're not offering universal services anymore. We've always struggled to get families in there, which is one of the reasons we actually got a childcare provider in the first place. We wanted to make better use of the building. In terms of the funding that is being saved, it is 14,000. It's, you know, it's not a lot of money. The rationale really for this was to maximise the use of that property for the local community. We and NCFP, who provided the Children's Centre service before the council took it on, have struggled to get families in and have always struggled with that site, especially since the service became targeted. Have I answered everything? I think I probably have. I think Lawrence has answered most of that. But certainly in terms of the numbers accessing, it is that double counting. We could find out some more information. The data, however, isn't held by us. It's held by the Healthcare Trust, who used to run the service prior to June when the council took it on. So it's a bit of work, but we can certainly confirm that figure.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we've had Councillor Deakin. Okay, quickly then, please now.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've listened to both sides of this really intently, to be fair. I can see both sides of this really clearly. I'm very torn, I think would be my word, because if it's such little use on it, and the school are going to make sure that the provision's there for the 2-year-olds as well moving forward, that's brilliant. But I remember using the Shore Start Centre with my daughter when she was young, and getting out of the house, doing those things in a group was really beneficial and good. So I must admit this one's torn me a little bit, and I know I've come in a little bit late on this one, Chair, but I really wanted to listen to everybody first so I can see, I'm really torn on this one, but I can see both sides of this very clearly. I think my only little bit of concern is that the lack of response that we've had. I think if we had some more replies from the consultation to give us a better picture, that would have been a lot nicer on this one, to give us a more thorough picture of what's happening in that area. But again, thank you for letting me come in late, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And to my mind, it's a no-brainer. Quite frankly, I don't see any need to sit on the fence or to not move forward with this. Let's look at the consultation. Now, can I remind you that the council ran a consultation exercise online, consultation hub form, from the 6th of December, from the 7th of December to the 18th of January. And I hear what Councillor Deakin says, in that there are a very small number of people responding to that consultation, and usually if people are opposed to something happening, they are the ones that will respond. It was a small number that responded. All of them were in favour of the proposals that are set out before us today. But really, Councillor Deakin, you can't expect members of the local community to necessarily respond when the consultation was sent to local members from the county council and indeed from the district council on the 4th of December, none of whom responded to the consultation. So if the community leaders are not even bothered to respond to the consultation, how can you expect and insist on members of the community doing so as well? So really, it's a nonsense to say that the consultation was in any way flawed. And I believe also that the school itself actually cascaded the consultation out to parents. So as far as I'm concerned, the consultation was perfectly valid. Lawrence Jones makes the point that our services are targeted at vulnerable children, and they are not necessarily the ones that are going to want to come into a centre. And we've been tasked at many a committee meeting, and in particular by Councillor Plant, how are you getting to the hard to reach people? How are you getting to the hard to reach families? Well, this is how we're getting to the hard to reach families. They've clearly demonstrated they don't want to come into the centre. So if the mountain won't come to Mohammed, Mohammed has to go to the mountain. And that is exactly what officers of this council are doing. They're going out to the community and delivering those services. And so you have a simple choice this morning. Do you want to carry on as we are with a centre that's used 2 hours a week for 6 to 7 families, or at least it was used for 6 to 7 families when the nursery was there, but probably not even 6 to 7 families now the nursery is not there? Or do you want to say to the school, here, make use of a publicly owned building for the whole community or more of the community, and let us focus on those hard to reach ones while you are dealing and providing with activities that the community are happy to participate in? And if you look at paragraph 12 of the report, let me just make the point clear. The school expressed their wishes to expand the provision at the school to meet the needs of local children. And isn't that what the service should be all about? To meet the needs of the local children through reconfiguring their provision for early years foundation stage and nurture group activities. It's all about service as far as I'm concerned, not about preserving buildings. Councillor Plant talked about what it was like 20 years ago, and I don't dispute that. But for goodness sake, 20 years ago, things were very different 20 years ago. Things move on. And we've got to move on, and we've got to move on our service. And I think this is going to make the best use of a building that has so been grotesquely underused for a long period of time, and that we shall be meeting the needs of far more members of the community than was ever met before. So as I said at the very beginning, to my mind, it is a no-brainer, and I'm happy to support the recommendations. Now, a recorded vote has been called for, and that has been seconded. So I'm going to ask the Democratic Services officer to read out the names of all members in turn of the committee, and you either vote in favour of the recommendation to make far better use of the facility of the Rhodesia Children's Centre, or you vote against that and leave it working for 2 hours a week and the rest of the week. So over to Democratic Services to call out the list.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to reiterate, I will now call upon committee members in alphabetical order to indicate whether they are for, against, or abstaining in respect of the recommendation before you. And we'll start with Councillor Deakin. Councillor Deakin, you're on mute.
There we are. Sorry, my mouse stopped working. Against.
Against, thank you. Councillor Elliott.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Handley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Against.
Thanks. Councillor Henshaw.
Against.
Thanks. Councillor Roger Jackson.
For.
For, thanks. Councillor Owen.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Peck.
Against.
Thanks. Councillor Plant.
Against.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Saddington.
For.
For. Thanks. And finally, Councillor Taylor.
For.
4. Thank you. And so the recommendation is approved by 6 votes to 5. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And so if we can move on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the interim visit to Nottinghamshire by Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission in October 2020, and update on the performance of the Integrated Children's Disability Service. Again, the report set out in front of you with an appendix, which is the Ofsted letter. We have a recommendation at the bottom of page 91, which I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second, Chairman.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Peck, sorry I missed you. Councillor Peck. And then Councillor Plant. You're on silent. You're muted, Councillor Peck.
Dear, there you go. It's the perils of Zoom and Teams, isn't it? The muting thing. But
I'm afraid so.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a good report. We'll be supporting it. I think there's much in the report to be encouraged by. I just wanted to pick out some points in bullet points on paragraph 7. There are some very positive points identified, and it's quite evident that our officers and the workforce generally have worked extremely hard in extremely difficult circumstances to ensure that our children and young people with SEND and their families are prioritised and have been supported. I do note the stress that the workforce has been under, and I think this is certainly true of many people in public service during the present period. And life has certainly been extremely difficult. There's no doubt about that. So I don't think we can be surprised about that. There's reference to the frequent changes in national guidance, which has obviously hindered the workforce in being able to respond in a consistent way, particularly as the national guidance has often been, the changes have been at short notice, as the report indicates. I'm really not that surprised, I suppose, because I think when it comes to the inevitable post-pandemic inquiry, I think we'll be hearing a lot about how unprepared our government was in dealing with the pandemic. But I do think that the report indicates that our workforce and our officers have been extremely proactive throughout. And I think that's probably true of most of local government across the country. I think they've perhaps been rather better in many of the responses than our government has at times. However, I therefore think we should pay great credit to all our officers and the workforce generally. I was very concerned to read the 7th bullet point as to how some parents and carers felt abandoned due to the restrictions imposed on services. We know that parents of children with special needs and disabilities, particularly those with the most severe special needs, we know how difficult life is at the best of times in bringing up children with those needs and making sure, fighting quite often to get the services and support that they require. So we know that's difficult at the best of times, and certainly over the last year that must have been many times more difficult. So I think it's understandable that some parents have felt that way. I know that life's not easy for them and requires great dedication. Parents must have been under great pressure. So again, it's perhaps not surprising to hear that. And I've no doubt that all the professionals have learned a great deal. Paragraph 8 lists some of the priorities. Perhaps most important is the bullet point in paragraph 8 that says to develop a collaborative multi-agency action plan for any future pandemic. And I think that's extremely important. I think all areas of our society, from government downwards, are going to have to learn a lot of lessons from what has been a unique experience for us all. And I'm sure this local authority will need to sit down at some point, not only as a local authority, but with all our partners to learn the lessons and make sure that we're extremely well prepared should, heaven forbid, we be faced with this situation again. I think as a nation we've had a huge wake-up call, and we must never be so ill prepared as a nation as we have been in many areas. Again, I think this local authority, from everything that I've seen and all the almost daily reports that we're getting, I think this local authority can feel proud that it's responded in an extremely proactive way throughout the whole of the pandemic. But that's not to say that there isn't much to learn. So I hope we're not faced with this situation again, but who knows? I don't know. But I think the whole point that in every aspect of our responsibilities as a local authority, we've got to make sure that we put everything in place and not ever become complacent in the future, that this can't happen again. So overall, a good report, and we will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Peck. Councillor Plant, I think you indicated, and then Councillor Saddington.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, fully support what Councillor Peck has said, and certainly won't repeat it. Again, a really difficult time, obviously, for families with special needs children, and also, to be fair, to say well done in terms of, obviously, I mean, the way the staff have responded, and also the stress they've also been on trying to provide the services. Just a question, really, because in the report it mentions one of the priorities agreed with the inspection team was to develop a recovery curriculum programme to support SEND pupils during and after the pandemic. I wondered if we could have a little bit more information on that. And some of the other priorities were to do with our relationship with health partners. And I wondered if there's been any development in perhaps improving that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saddington.
Thank you, Chairman. I would say that throughout the whole authority and throughout the country, if we're talking about this particular item, officers, parents, staff, and everybody one can think of has been affected by this dreadful virus. And yes, you can say, Councillor Peck, that we may not have been prepared. I don't think any government has been prepared for this, but I think we have to give credit where credit's due, and our local authority have really come up trumps. As you've alluded to, we've had regular briefings. And yes, I was at a meeting where it was reported what the children have thought. But I think everybody could say they felt isolated and frustrated, and it was unexpected. And the people have become angry and desperate and depressed. And we've all had to pull ourselves through it, whether we're talking about any local children's services or us as just members. And I think credit must be given where credit is due to the officers, the staff and the parents who have pulled these children through this situation. And we must never forget, yes, it can happen again, but we are now aware that these things can happen. Who would have thought 12 months ago, 15 months ago, we would have been so isolated, all of us throughout the year, all of us having to get used to a different situation. But I think we must give credit where credit is due to all the officers, the staff, the parents who have worked through a very difficult year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Saddington. Councillor Henshaw, sorry, Councillor Henshaw.
Yes, thanks, Chair, for bringing me in. Touching on a similar point to Councillor Peck's in relation to people that's been felt, or parents that felt abandoned. I mean, if you look at the yellow pages in relation to the meeting or the report, where it's the first page where it says inspector spoke to parents of 28 children, basically saying that they did interviews, but they didn't actually interview any of the children that actually use the services. I just wonder what's happening in relation to this, so that the actual children are encouraged in any future report or inspection to actually participate, because I think it's vitally important. If they are able to participate, then they should actually be listened to and considered. I think that's just good practice, because, and also it says in the report, families were not also included in discussions of how best they were to be supported. So I think that's another point where we need to really look at that and ensure in the future that parents do feel included and they are actually consulted in a more meaningful way. I know sometimes it's difficult to actually get people to participate, but you know, it should be good practice to actually encourage people, whether or not the service users or people that are providing the service, to actually participate in the inspection. And penultimately, I just wanted to raise the issue that's highlighted on page 110, where it says there's been an identified number of fixed term exclusions for children and young people with SEND, and it's saying that we need to address this point better in the future. I just wonder, it may well be in the report and I've missed it, what we're going to do to ensure that you know, we do actually include that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. There have been several questions there, which are there's recovery curriculum, health partners development, meeting with children and discussions on how they can be best supported. Then lastly, anything on exclusions. Which officer is going to pick that one up or pick those up?
I'll certainly make a start, Councillor Owen. Okay, Karen may want to come in a little bit around curriculum and exclusions. Yeah. I think just to say that we'd realised even before Ofsted arrived this time for a visit, and it was a visit rather than an inspection, just to emphasise, and the CQC, that we knew that families had struggled, and it was very, very difficult last year with that balance of what we could safely and effectively delivered versus actually what both children and parents want. And I think it's fair to say, certainly for children, they've had a very mixed experience. Some of them have had real issues. Others actually, perhaps who were nervous learners who didn't like to attend school, have actually made real gains during this time. And actually, some of the way that we've used technology and have taught some of these children has actually brought some of them forward. So there's some positive lessons to learn, as well as the slightly more difficult ones to take on board about the way that we've involved services. So our SEND Accountability Board, which is multi-agency, involves elected members and a number of health colleagues, I think has grown in strength during this time. And certainly all of the conversations around forward planning, learning the lessons, are all taking place in that meeting and form part of our longer SEND strategy. It's probably notable actually that we had these 2 days of visit from Ofsted the day before Nottinghamshire entered Tier 3. So they were talking about planning for the next one, and we knew that it was coming the day after they left. So probably didn't leave us much time to put things in place then. But certainly in terms of our thoughts and our strategies, that's very much developed. The Parents and Carers Forum hold a number of seats actually on the SEND Accountability Board. So we have a very much an ongoing conversation with them. Obviously through our participation strategy, we have things like Young Pioneers and various other ways of reaching young people. Ofsted did make an offer to speak with a number of children. It's just that for various reasons that didn't happen, but I think they were themselves mindful of the fact that their interactions with children were lacking, and that hadn't formed a good part of this report. Although I do know the Children's Commissioner's Office, although not Nottinghamshire centred, have also done some good work with similar findings actually directly with children and young people. In respect of the kind of the findings around around exclusions, I mean, Ofsted and CQC obviously came to look at the area rather than the council specifically, so we were only one part of that. And of course, the the nature of exclusions are complex at the moment. Many of them relate to academy schools and also academy schools that are in very, very difficult circumstances at the moment in terms of having to take in children with additional needs because those are the populations they need to serve at the moment, but also with some of those behaviours causing difficulties given some of the ways that we need to keep staff in those schools and other children safe as well. So some difficult circumstances, I think. Again, much to learn from it. But also much to do in terms of making sure those children are well served in the future. I'll perhaps hand over to Karen, because you might want to talk a little bit more about recovery curriculum more widely and some of the challenges around exclusions.
Yes, thank you, Lawrence. Karen?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Owen. It certainly did present some new challenges, I think, to schools, in that children who they would normally manage by sending them out into small group rooms, things like that, to help support their behaviours in schools were no longer an option. And some of the behaviours that children were exhibiting in terms of perhaps those who spit, those kind of behaviours, which under normal circumstances, schools have systems to manage such behaviours, but in coronavirus, they took on a new turn and a new concern. But I think there has been a notable difference between how things were managed during the first lockdown and how things have been managed through this lockdown, where schools have had time to plan better and make additional changes to the offer that they make to children that meet coronavirus health and safety rules, but also support these children to be in school and learning. I think similarly with the blended learning and children learning at home, there have been significant improvements from that first lockdown to the latest lockdown. Some of the parents in the Ofsted visit were saying that there was blended learning provided by the schools, but that it wasn't particularly differentiated well for the SEND needs of their child. And I think, again, second time around, schools have had much more time to put plans in place around how to make that differentiated learning more effective for children and young people with SEND needs. Thank you, Councillor Owen.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I think all of those questions have been adequately dealt with, or at least I hope you feel they have. Councillor Peck started with, in his usual uncharitable way towards the government, very characteristic, but there we are.
I'm just an old curmudgeon.
Sorry?
I'm just an old curmudgeon.
Well, you are, but I didn't like to say that. The government was unprepared. Well, the whole world was unprepared, Councillor Peck. I don't think any of us. Did you really imagine a year ago that we'd be where we are now, having gone through what we've gone now? Of course not. The last pandemic, I believe, was in 1918, when we had an influenza pandemic. I remember my grandmother talking to me about it, but we didn't discuss lockdowns and things like that. Of course, the whole world was unprepared. Of course, there will be lessons to be learned. And you criticised that changes in national guidance, often at very short notice. But I would remind you, Councillor Peck, the government can't win over this. If they give longer term of notice before they change guidance, they're criticised for leaving it too long. Why aren't you doing it straight away? Air travel corridors, for example, you should have done it yesterday, not leave it 2 weeks down the line. So, you know, they really cannot win on this whatsoever. We've been in very difficult times. I think council officers have responded magnificently. There will clearly be work to be done once the lockdown is over and once we're back to some degree of normality. I think plans are already being put in place. We're hearing about summer schools and lessons taking place over the summer to try and catch up some of the work that's been missed. We will recover. We will get there. It's still a long haul yet, but for goodness sake, don't be too critical. I'm sure when we come to look back at the way it's been dealt with, there will be lessons to be learned, and we can say, yes, things with the benefit of hindsight. and it's always with the benefit of hindsight, we could have done things in a different way.
Aye.
I think this is not a bad report, considering the circumstances in which it's had to be prepared. So, can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? Thank you. That, I think, is unanimous, despite the curmudgeonliness of some members. Thank you very much. Can we move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is reorganisation of the Statutory Education, Health and Care Plan Assessment Team in the Integrated Children's Disability Service. Again, reports set out in front of you, and there are 4 recommendations on this occasion. Actually, the recommendations themselves are on page 126, and I will move those.
And I will second those, Chair. I think we're item 9, aren't we? I think you referenced the disability service again when you spoke.
Sorry? Have I?
Ofsted.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
item 9. It's the you.
Sorry,
the last item.
Inspection, yeah.
We're on. Sorry, I've skipped ahead, haven't I? Have I?
Yes.
Yes, my apologies. It is item 9, progress in implementation areas for improvement outlining the Ofsted inspection. My apologies for that. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I've been locked down for too long with Mrs. Owen, or she's been locked down too long with me. I don't know which. The recommendations or recommendation is on page 117. My apologies. Can I move that recommendation?
And I will second that.
Thank you. I've got it right now. Any comments or questions? Councillor Plant.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously the Labour Group welcomes this report. It was in October 2019, which seems an age away now, obviously, and we have had a year-long pandemic in between that. It was really pleasing, obviously, to read at paragraph 4 that when Ofsted did come, that the Care Leavers service has been transformed. That was brilliant. And also again that many strengths within the local authority practice were highlighted, notably the skill and commitment of the workforce and the positive support of their managers. So I think that was, well, that was excellent. Just a question really on the areas for improvement. The care of looked after children placed with family and friend carers, which was seen as an area of concern. I wondered if that included special guardianship. Does that come under that area? And I did wonder what sort of numbers. I know that must vary, obviously, in terms of, or it must vary all at the time, but sort of a rough sort of ballpark figure of what sort of numbers of looked after children are actually placed with family or friends and carers. And then it mentions the kinship review, and I just wondered when that was taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Who's going to pick up those questions from Councillor Plant?
I think Steve Edwards is best placed.
Yeah.
There.
Steve, would you like to do that for us?
I'm just trying to switch my microphone on. Struggle. So it's the children that are placed with family and friends are always looked after because they're with family and friends, and a special guardianship order doesn't mean that you're looked after. But the easiest, and I can get the figures for Councillor Plant, but we probably do on average in a year more special guardianship orders are made by the courts than there are adoption orders, and that's something that's been happening nationally for a number of years. I can get you the cumulative figures, but I haven't got them sort of available now. Comparisons between adoption and looked after. Is that okay?
Yep, thank you for that.
Kinship review, Councillor. Sorry, Steve.
So we're doing a review of kinship it isn't finished yet, but given that we're as I've already said, we're doing more special guardianship orders than we are adoptions. Or sometimes they're also an alternative to long-term fostering. We're actually reviewing the level of support that we provide to kinship carers, because at the moment it isn't equitable. So if you're a foster carer or a adopter, you probably get more support from the state than you would do if you're legally caring for a child who's a connected person, a family or friend. So we're looking at how we can address that and provide more support post-order to family and friends carers, because often there are real challenges for them. The children are still having contact often with the parents that they could no longer live with. So it can become quite a complicated situation. People need a lot of support.
Councillor Henshaw.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In relation to the report, which I found very interesting to read, the point on experiences and progress of children help and need protection, which obviously said and has been discussed partially, saying in the inspection it requires improvement, and then obviously the action plan to facilitate those improvements is being worked through and followed. It mentions in paragraph 8 on page 116 that the next inspection, Ofsted have confirmed that it's going to be more of an assurance based and focused on possibly that particular point that we fell down on. Are the officers convinced that when the Ofsted inspection resumes that there will be a notable improvement, so that would go from requires improvement to possibly a good recommendation? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Steve, do you want to just come back on that?
Well, that'd be like Councillor Henshaw putting my mortgage on something that I'm not really, can't really guarantee the truth. I think how I would answer that is I think we've all worked collectively really, really hard to improve the areas that were identified as needing improvement. And I think we've made the right steps and we're doing the right thing.
Okay.
I think it's really difficult because we've been talking about the COVID. We've had COVID for a year. I'm really proud, actually, our social workers and our early help staff. We've got the best figures in the East Midlands for social workers and other colleagues actually going out and physically seeing children. So I think we've done a lot, and we've made sure that we contact every single child at least once a week. If that can be over social media or the phone. So I think we are moving in the right direction. I think it's been incredibly difficult. I think we've had a lot of support from our politicians in the committee, and I think our staff recognise that. I think there's still quite a way to go, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. And of course, Ofsted, quite rightly, always raised the bar as well. So you've got to carry on pushing to get better. But I'm very confident we're doing the right things.
Thank you for that, Steve. Lawrence indicated first, and then Colin. Lawrence.
Sorry, we may be about to say the same thing, but it was just to clarify that if we have an assurance visit, it won't actually change any of our gradings. It won't be until we get a full inspection that there's a change in any grading, but it would certainly give an indication of progress against those areas.
Okay. Thank you. Colin, was that the same point or something different?
It's something slightly different, Councillor Owen, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
The previous agenda item 8, illustrated that Nottinghamshire was to be one of 18 local authorities that would have an assurance visit around Send. In the end, because of lockdown, we were one of only 6 or 7. And we were one of those local authorities that invited Ofsted in to do that visit around Send. And again, this report at agenda item 9, where we've included not only the update, our progress, but also the annual review letter as an appendix. I think both of those things illustrate that the department has a culture of accountability, challenge, inviting as a performance management by the Children and Young People's Committee. And we put those things before you Yeah, with the right culture of realising that these services for vulnerable children are services that elected members and councillors should quite rightly challenge, yeah, and question officers on, and we do that through a range of other arrangements, not just the Children and Young People's Committee, but as Lawrence mentioned too earlier, the SEND Accountability Board, which members are members on, and we have the Care and Care Leavers board, as well as the governance arrangements. So I just wanted to say that we're absolutely open to that challenge. We welcome that challenge. Yeah, we think that's a healthy environment and culture, and I'm confident that we're making good progress on those areas, those small areas that we had to improve.
Thank you for that. I think that concludes all the comments that members wish to and officers wish to make. Councillor Plant started by pointing out that Ofsted had said what a good workforce we had got. I don't think we needed Ofsted to come in and tell us that. We knew that all along anyway, and they were simply confirming what we already know. We have an excellent workforce who've coped magnificently in the difficult current climate, and you've just heard the latest figures where we are the best in the East Midlands for contacting and visiting those young people. So what more is there to be said other than all those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you. Right, may I now move to item number 10 with Councillor Taylor's permission. As I said before, the report is in front of you, and there are 4 recommendations set out on page 126, which I am happy to move.
I'm happy to second them, Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from members? No, in which case, Councillor Plant, was that a wave or a vote in favour, or are you wanting to comment, or what? Are you just waving to me? You're muted now, so I need to know.
I thought I was too slow off the mark there, but obviously your eagle eye caught sight of me.
Many years of practice, don't forget.
Yes, obviously we welcome the report and the reorganisation. I'm particularly pleased to see, in terms of the aims, to improve the outcomes into adulthood, including access to employment for obviously SEND young people, which is never easy, but was certainly, it is certainly something that we need to focus on and do all we can to actually get them to achieve that. So that's good. I just wanted to, my question is, what is the statutory timescale for an EH education and healthcare plan? I'd just like to know what that is, because obviously we're doing very well on that, but I certainly don't know what the timescale for that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Plant. Councillor Henshaw, were you waving to me, or were you voting?
No, Chair.
No. Okay. Right. Well, there's been one question from Councillor Plant. The statutory timescale for an EHC plan. Can anybody give us that information?
I certainly can do, Councillor Owen. So it's from the date of application. The process is 20 weeks. So that's the decision in order to undertake an assessment, the gathering of all the assessments from all of the professionals, the assessment of all of those separate assessments into a single plan format, a decision about whether to issue a plan, and then the consultations back with parents and young people about the plan as well. So that whole process, 20 weeks, excluding any times where information needs to be gathered from schools, but they are closed. So, for example, over the summer. So there can be a pausing on the clock within that 20 weeks in certain circumstances.
Thank you very much for that. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. That is unanimous again. Thank you very much. The next item is item 11, which is changes to the staffing establishment in children's social care. Report set out 2 recommendations on page 133, which I move.
And I second, Chairman.
We're all happy with that? Can we move to the vote? All those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous. Next item, local authority governor appointments. It's really just a noting report, but we have a recommendation on page 137, which I move.
And I second, Chair.
Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, thank you. That's unanimous. And the last item is the work programme. And again, we've got the recommendation on page 140, which I move.
And I second, Chairman.
Thank you. All those in favour? Don't know whether we have to have a formal vote. Thank you very much. I suppose we do. That is unanimous again. Thank you very much for your attendance. We've got through another meeting without any technical glitches, which is, I think we're getting better. We're learning all the time, or somebody's learning, and I'll see you all soon, if not in person, in virtual reality. Thank you very much for your contributions.
Thank you, councillors.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.